أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم. تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. وضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جود من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. فإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. الشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون. فإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون. إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. فإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون ما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. فإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا ونطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون. فمن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون فذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون فلهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون. فاتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون. فلا يعزوك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. ولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين. وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. وليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Please recite Surah Al-Hamd and Tita and Qul Wallah for the being whose name should be appearing on the screen. Bismillahir
محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العشام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تصامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكروك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك إلهي وربي من لي غيرك إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودي وخالفت بعد أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مبعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فأقبل يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تباعد من أدنيته أو تشرد من آويته أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثور يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أدج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي. فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائي وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك. وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك. أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك. فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأدجن إليك بين أهلها دجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدي تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتي، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيتي، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يدج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت فيه الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين يقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدك وقاضيت به من إخلاد معاندك. لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناؤك. قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلته أو بر نشرته أو رزق بسطته أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا رب يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بدري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا رب رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار وذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده ومن كادني فكيد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجدني بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قاضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعام يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا صلوات
माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं नीले परे हैं चेहरे इतने लगे तमाचे कोई नहीं जो उनको पानी तलक पिला दे ये कैसी बेकसी है रोते हैं शाहजादे बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं कूफे की तंग कलिया और रात है अंधेरी इतने चले हैं पैदल पाँव भी उनके जख्मी एक दूसरे से बोले क्या है यही यतीमी बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं जुल्फे पकड़ के हारिस लेकर चला जो घर से थर्रा रहे थे दोनों उस बदगोहर के डर से फरियाद कर रहे थे कुछ रहम हम पे खाओ बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं तलवार खींच जिस दम दोनों लगे ये कहने कर कत्ल मुझको पहले कर कत्ल मुझको पहले लो हो गए जुदा सर दोनों के आज तन से बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं, बाकी रहे न बाबा
माँ से पिछड़ गए।
सर तश्त में रखा और दरिया में फेंकी लाशें, बरकर गले में डाली एक दूसरे ने बाहे, जाकर मिले खुदा से करते रहे यूं आहे, बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं, मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं, बाकी रहे न बाबा
माँ से बिछड़ गए।
देखा न ऐसा मंजर नौशाद आसमाने, कूफे में जैसे देखी रुदाद आसमाने, रोई जमीन और की फरियाद आसमाने, बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं, मुस्लिम के दोनों बच्चे दर दर भटक रहे हैं, बाकी रहे न बाबा माँ से बिछड़ गए हैं। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु लाल रुकैया के
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وآل محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم زين للناس حب الشهوات من النساء والبنين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Elders, brothers, sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Although it is the night of the Shahadah of the Atfal, the two sons of Muslim ibn Aqil, it is of course very happy, very joyful to see the brothers here after such a long break. The days of Muharram are now approaching, and the azaa of Imam Husayn alayhi salam will never stop. And it is beautiful that we have congregated today to remember and to commemorate the azaa of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. It will never be stopped, and it will continue until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And of course, as the center will remain open during the days of Muharram, we should make it our individual responsibility to come and fill the halls as much as possible every day. The azaa of Imam Husayn alayhi salam will never stop. That's guaranteed. It will never stop. Let's be part of that movement. Let us not stay home, rather to try and come into the centers as much as possible. Tonight is the night of the Shahada of the two sons of Muslim ibn Aqil. And what we learn from the life, the very little information that we have of these two sons, was their mental capacity, was their mental intellectual capacity. Although, according to some of the narrations, they were 10 and 8 years of age respectively, other narrations explain that they were 5 and 3. They were babies, they were children of Muslim ibn Aqil. Although they were young, they had the mental capacity of a 20-year-old, of a 30-year-old, or even a 40-year-old. And the reason why that is because of the conversation that they had with Harith al-Hamadani, their killer, which I will recite in the Masjid, inshallah. Although their mental capacity was that of an adult, you realize that majority of this goes back to Muslim ibn Aqil and the tarbiyah that he engaged in with his children. You see, he had 4 sons and 1 daughter. 2 of his sons were slaughtered, were killed, were martyred on this night in Kufa. The 2 others, they were slaughtered on the day of Ashura alongside Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And then the daughter Hamida, which we often recite in the Masa'ib, when she was part of the camp of the ladies, and who was of course amongst the prisoners alongside the holy lady Az-Zainab salamullahi alayha. Our discussion therefore tonight is of 3 areas, and I want to focus on these 3 areas, inshallah. Inshallah you'll learn from this presentation. The first area, with regards to children, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about children a lot in the Holy Quran, throughout the Holy Quran. What is the reality of having children? Number 1. Number 2, when a person does have children, what are his responsibilities? Or in a different perspective, what are the effects of having children? And number 3, finally, what practical methods can we apply in this day and age to actively engage in the tarbiyah of our children? And then we'll move on to the masa'ib of the atfal of Muslim ibn Aqil. As far as the first conversation is concerned, or the first area of our discussion, when we speak about the reality of children, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created every single human being with the desire of having children. As the human being grows older, as he becomes much more mature, the want and the need, the desire of having children begins to grow from within him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in many of the ayat. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has programmed the man or the human being with the love of حُبُّ النِّسَاء, حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاء. Number one, women, or spouses in general, if you want to look at the broader translation of the verse. That every single human being desires a spouse. Number two, وَالْبَنِينَ. And having children. You find that it comes immediately after having spouse. And then of course, as the ayah continues, Allah then speaks about, for example, gold and silver and the wealth of this world. But the point being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has programmed by default every single human being to have children, or the desire of wanting children. There's a second verse, وَأَمْدَدْنَا لَكُمْ وَأَمْدَدْنَا لَكُمْ بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ. And indeed we have performed your madad, we have helped you, we have supported you, we have enhanced you with number one, mal, with wealth, and number two, with baneen, with children. So when we gather all of the verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about children and having children, the desires of having an offspring, you find that innately every single human being desires to have offsprings. So when you look into the history of the Holy Quran specifically, you look into the history of certain anbiya, certain personalities, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about certain personalities who for the major part of their lives were unable to have children. The likeness of Nabi Zakaria. Nabi Zakaria, day in, day out, he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says to him, فَحَبْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا يَرِثُنِي وَيَرِثُ آلِ Ya'qub. He says, Ya Allah, grant me a child. For which reason? Does Nabi Zakaria turn to God and say, Ya Allah, give me a child and that's it? No. He says, Ya Allah, give me a child with the purpose that this child will inherit from me. That he will be my inheritance. He will be part of my inheritance. That's something very profound that we need to understand. That when the desire of having children grows within our hearts, the reason why that desire exists is because we want to pass something down to them. We want to leave behind a legacy. Whether that be knowledge, whether that be wealth, whether that be, for example, wisdom, assets, properties, whatever it may be. There is something that I have in my life that I do not want it to be taken away from me, and I want it to be inherited by my offspring. And so you find that many people in this world, they have children. They may have children with the sole purpose of just wanting their children to inherit from them. But the Ahlul Bayt or even the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have a higher goal, that they actively take part in the tarbiyah of that child. You look at another example, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. Nabi Ibrahim for many years of his life did not have children. When he enters his final stages of his life, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him number one, Ishaq, and number two, Ismail. Beyond that, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about certain personalities who did not have children in their lives, but they adopted children. Like whom? Number one, Aziz of Egypt in the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, when he adopts Nabi Yusuf. And number two, Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun, when she adopts Nabi Musa alayhi salam. Interestingly, when you look at these two verses, the first verse referring to Aziz and the second verse referring to Asiya, they both mention the same words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala copy-pastes the same ayah. What did they say? They said, Asa ayyan fa'ana, oh nattakhidahu walada. We hope that these children, the child, if we were to adopt them, they will bring about benefit for us in our lives. So you find that human beings naturally, we see goodness in the children that we have. We see that for them to be part of our lives is a blessing for us in one way or another. Moving on, you find that according to the Holy Quran, and there is a Quranic presence behind this discussion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about certain individuals who did not have children in their lives, sons in particular. Like whom? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The Holy Prophet of Islam, his son Qasim, he was very young when he passed away. Allah grants him a son, but then takes that son away from him. They say that when Qasim was taken away from the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah was in the state of grief. He was a human being as well, just as how we are human beings. He had emotions just the way we have emotions. Rasulullah, the only difference is, because he is the greatest creation of Allah and the message that he carried on his shoulders, he wished that one day one of his sons would inherit this mission from him. He would take on the responsibility. Except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him a son and then takes that son away from him. The Arabs, the Quraysh of Mecca, made fun of him and they labeled him as Abtar, someone who has no lineage whatsoever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consoles him with the greatest words, the greatest manifestation of consolation. What does he say? He says, Inna atayna kal kawthar. He says, indeed, we have given you Kawthar. What's the meaning and interpretation of Kawthar? Abundance of goodness. What's abundance of goodness? One of the manifestations of Al-Kawthar is Az-Zahra salamullahi alayha. Through Az-Zahra, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Through the Holy Lady, she has many children, Imam Hassan, Imam Husayn, salamullahi alayhima. From amongst them, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We have the lineage of the Sadat. Today you look into the world, you find millions of Sadat all over the globe. All of them going back to the Holy Lady and Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhim salam. So you realize that when Rasulullah was told by Allah that we will give you Kawthar, abundance of goodness, one of the interpretations is what? It's not just Az-Zahra salamullahi alayha, but that he will be given a lineage. And one of the greatest lineages is the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Moving on, in history we find the ulama. There were certain individuals amongst the ulama who were, unfortunately, they did not have children. The likeness of who? The likeness of a Sheikh Az-Zainuddin al-Amili, known as a Shaheed al-Thani. Shaheed al-Thani, very interesting history of this person. He's one of the illuminating stars of this madhab. May Allah increase his station in the hereafter. Shaheed al-Thani, history tells us, he had many sons. According to some narrations, he had 7 sons, but they all died in their infancy. They all died when they were young. Allah grants him a son and then takes away that son from him. 7 times. But this person in his iman, he was so fortified in his iman, he moved closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They said after he lost one son after another, he sat down and he began to write a book. And he writes a book, which is available, it's been translated in the English language, where he talks about how a person should interact with grief and sorrow and bala and imtihan in his life. That if a person, for example, unfortunately, a child is taken away from him, rather than moving away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he should try and cater that emotion so that he moves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he writes a book according to his own methods of how he moved closer to Allah, what a person should do when he loses his son. And may Allah protect us from such an imtihanat. So you find that Shaheed al-Thani, he was then eventually granted a son. But Shaheed al-Thani, was executed before his son reached the stages of bulugh. So you find that eventually, even though he did have a son and that son grew up to be a scholar himself, Shaheed al-Thani did not see the elder years of his son's life. Moving on, you find in history, for example, very interesting history. In the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, even though he did not have children in his lifetime, he did have grandsons, Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn alayhim salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That the Holy Prophet, he would constantly be seen playing with Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn in public, in the Masjid, in the Musalla, for example, when he would pray, Imam Hassan and Imam Husayn, they would jump on him, they would play with him as he is leading Salat al-Jama'ah, and the companions are there behind him, following him in Salat al-Jama'ah. And these ahadith are plenty in number. These ahadith are numbers, the numbers go beyond the different denominations, that they are accepted by both the Ahl al-Shia and the Ahl al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. That the love that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi had for his 2 grandsons was immeasurable. that he loved them to such an extent that he would profess his love even in public. And this, of course, tells us and highlights to us how we should introduce ourselves to our children. That when you ask the question, what is the nature of having children? What is the reality, the haqiqat of having children according to the Quran? It is an internal disposition of the human being, the innate nature of the human being to have children. Now we move on to the second area of the discussion. When Allah grants the person a child, whether it be a son or a daughter, what is our responsibility? Do we sit back, relax ourselves, and not engage in the tarbiyah of our children? Or should we actively engage in the tarbiyah of our children? Refer back to the words of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. In his Risalat al-Huquq, when he speaks about the right of the son, he says that our sons represent us. What does that mean, our sons represent us and our daughters represent us? He says, وَأَمَّا حَقُّ وَلَدِكَ عَلَيْكَ. And as for the right of your son on you, as an individual, as a mukallaf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَأَن تَعْلَمَ أَنَّهُ مِنْكَ. First and foremost, that you understand that he is from you. أَنَّهُ مِنْكَ وَمُضَافٌ إِلَيْكَ. And he is associated with you. He is connected to you. He is attributed to you. And there is no separation between you and him. فأن تعلم أنه منك ومضاف إليك في آجل الدنيا بخيره وشره. That he is associated with you with regards to all of the good that he does in dunya and all of the evil that he does in dunya. When you look at a son, you find that automatically as a community, we've been built up, not just our community, any community in the world, transcends religion, transcends the culture, borders. Every single community in this world, we subconsciously judge one another. We look at a child, when we see that child, we judge the father based on what we see in the child. Therefore, if the child does something good, if he grows up to be someone great, naturally we respect the father. If the child turns out to be a criminal, for example, a person who has deviated from Sirat al-Mustaqim, we judge the father, not consciously, but subconsciously. Every single person in this world behaves in such a way. And Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam makes it very clear that this is how we behave. That he is mudafun ilayk, he is an extension of you. If you see him do good, then that good will go back to you as a father. If you see him do evil, that evil will go back to him will go back to you as a father. So you find naturally Imam Zayn al-Abidin highlights a very strong reality that we are connected with our children that cannot be separated. Let me give you an example, very simple example. The example is of an alim. Say for example, in our community there is an alim. The alim grows old, he caters the needs of the community, he raises the children of the community. One day, rahmatullah alayhi, he passes away and returns to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He leaves behind sons. When he leaves behind sons, you find that this alim, although he has left this world, the people will look at the sons and they will look at or they will remind themselves of that alim. If the son or one of the sons grows up and decides to be a scholar, goes to, for example, the seminaries and becomes a scholar and comes back and serves the community, you'll find the elders in the community, they will come to him and they will praise him. They will see happiness in their hearts. They will say, we saw your father and we love that you are following your father's footsteps, that you yourself are now becoming a scholar. If the son deviates, for example, and he becomes a deviant, and he, for example, leaves, becomes a fasik, for example, publicly sins, doesn't care about the laws of the religion of Islam, then the people will see him and they will feel sorry for that scholar. They will feel hurt that his son has gone against the message or the footsteps of his father. This is how we naturally behave. That when we see children in the community, we associate their behavior with the father as well. So you find that naturally what happens is when you refer to the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, The likeness of Imam al-Sajjad, when he highlights this reality that we are connected with our sons and our sons are connected with their fathers, we have a responsibility to make sure that we raise them in the appropriate fashion, that we make sure that they are considered to be waladun salih, that they are considered to be righteous sons. And this term waladun salih is there manifest in the riwayat more than you can imagine. Waladun salih rayhanatum min rayahin al-jannah. That when a person has a son, a righteous son, not just a son, a righteous son, then he is considered to be a fragrance from the fragrance of Jannah. What does that mean? Fragrance is a multi-billion-dollar industry in this day and age, isn't it? Fragrance, when you smell something which is nice, it brings about peace, it brings about solace, it brings comfort. It can enhance an emotion, it can destroy an emotion as well. Fragrance can create relationships and can create bonds between individuals, between spouses, for example. When you smell something disgusting, when you smell something vile, it can bring about discomfort. You find that when Allah or when the Ahlul Bayt say that having a righteous son is a nice fragrance from the fragrances of Jannah, it doesn't mean that literally, or it can mean, but it doesn't only literally mean that they will have a nice fragrance in Jannah. It means that they will bring about peace for the person. It will bring about serenity and tranquility for that person as he enters the kingdom of heaven. And a second narration, very important narration that we all know of, it says, إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنَ آدَمْ انْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثَةٍ. That when a person dies and leaves this world, his amal dies and leaves this world as well with him, except for 3 a'mal. Which? Number 1, sadaqatul jariyah. Sadaqatul jariyah, someone comes and announces that there is an orphanage that's been built. Perform sadaqatul jariyah. Give as much as you can. We are attracted to sadaqatul jariyah. Yes, why? Because we know that if we give from our wealth, this giving from our wealth will continue as it will continue even when we've left this world. It will continue even in the hereafter. The rewards will come and they will multiply and we will see the benefits in barzakh or in the hereafter, as long as dunya is alive. So you find that sadaqatul jariyah is number 1, something that continues after we die. Number 2, al-ilmu yuntafu bih. Ilm which manifests its benefits. Ilm which benefits the human being as long as he is alive, even after he has passed on, or the knowledge that people have benefited from him. Al-ilmu yuntafu bih. And number 3, al-waladun salihun yad'u lah. A righteous child who prays for his parents when his parents have passed away. You find that in this world of capitalism, unfortunately, you find that many people are geared into accumulating mass wealth. People want to gain wealth. People want to gain the pleasures of this world. When you ask them, why do you work for so long? You come home, you go straight to sleep. Baba, you have a wife, you have children. Spend time with them, engage in their lives, be part of their lives, know what's going on in their lives. They say, no. I will accumulate wealth because I want my son to enjoy his life and not be the way I was when I was a child. It's a good reason. Yes, we want comfort for our children. But that doesn't mean that you compromise your time with your children. You find people who are workaholics. They will spend the entire day working and earning so that their sons will benefit from their riches, not knowing that when they leave this world, their sons and their daughters will not remember them. They don't go to the Qabristan. They don't recite Surah Al-Fatiha from time to time. They don't organize majalis. They don't organize niyaz for their marhumin. The father, he spends his entire life catering for the needs of his children, only to find that his children have neglected him. And how many of this have we seen in this world? That they have accumulated and spent their entire lives accumulating mass wealth only to be forgotten by their children. So you find here the Imam alayhi salam says that the a'mal of the human being, when he engages in the tarbiyah of his son, when he raises a righteous child, the effects of this righteous child will benefit him even after he has left this world. In a third narration, you find a famous narration of Isa alayhi salam when he passes through a grave one day. When he looks down onto the grave, he sees what? He sees a person who is in punishment, in the state of punishment, in barzakh. He is a recipient of Allah's adhab. A year later, when he passes the same grave, he sees this same person in the grave. He is benefiting from the rewards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He turns to Allah, he says, Ya Allah, in the time span of a year, what changed so much? Last year I came, I saw him in the state of adhab. This time I see him in a state of bliss and reward. Allah replies, he says, he left behind waladun salih. He left behind a righteous son, and this son of his, he believes or he remembers his father, and he engages in ibadat, sending rewards to his father. The greatest asset of a human being is to raise a righteous child, especially in this day and age. When we have a child, when we have children, there are two options that we have on the table in front of us. Either we neglect their tarbiyah, we do not take part in their upbringing. And there are fathers like this. There are fathers who, when they have children, they sit back, they relax. They don't care what their child is learning in school. They don't care what their children are doing on the internet. They don't care, for example, who their children are talking to. They don't care what information is being given to them. They don't care what they believe. There is no iman in their hearts. They don't care. There is no fiqh in their lives. They don't care. All they care is about the A's and the A stars that their children get from school. That's all they care about. There is more to this life than just wanting your children to learn and to exceed in their examinations. There is an entire ocean of tarbiyah that has to be catered for. You find, for example, when you refer to the biographies of certain scholars and how they used to engage with their fathers and how their fathers used to engage with them, wallah, I tell you, it will surprise you that their scholars, although they would spend their entire day studying and teaching, they would have thousands of students under them, yet they would come home and they would spend time with their children. They would spend most of the days sleeping 4 or 5 hours because of how busy they were. We need people like these in our communities, those who are invested in the tarbiyah of their children. Now we move on to the third area of our discussion. The third area of our discussion is profoundly important. What do I need to do in this day and age? What practical methods do I engage with when raising my children? Number one, ad-du'a. Dua is profound. It shows that you are constantly in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are all in need of wanting help and madad from Allah in raising our children, in engaging in their tarbiyah. Yes, I can engage in their lives. I can be a part of their lives. But first and foremost, I need help from Allah. Look at Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. When he engages in his dua, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a righteous child, he turns to Allah, he says, Ya Allah, waj'alhum busara, waj'alhum atqiya, waj'alhum abraran, waj'alhum sami'in, muti'in laka wa awliya'ik. He says, Ya Allah, I am asking you that you make them pious individuals. The Imam alayhi salam is asking Allah, make my children pious. Number two, Ya Allah, make them pure and God-fearing. Ya Allah, make them atqiya wa busara, give them basira, give them foresightedness, give them the ability to understand right from wrong, for them to be able to distinguish haqq from batil. Ya Allah, make them sami'een, make them listen to your qawl, your risala, your message. No, not just that, make them submit to your message. Muti'een laka, give them obedience to your message. Wa awliya'ik, and those whom you have appointed as your messengers. Number one, dua, fundamental when it comes to the upbringing of our children. Number two, we need to teach them the adab and the different etiquettes that we engage with on a daily basis. For example, the adab of akal, the adab of eating and drinking. Sit on a table, not in front of the television. Sit together when you sit for dinner or lunch. Make sure that you teach your children not to look at the faces of others when they are chewing their food. Make sure that you teach them how to wash their hands before and after. When the meal is finished, teach them how to give shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Teach them how to give shukr to the one who has cooked the food. It shows appreciation. It shows humility to the one who has cooked the food. Teach them the adab of hadith, of how to speak with one another. Qulu linnasi husna, and say good unto the people. Teach them how to speak with the elders. Teach them how to speak with those who are younger than them. Teach them how to show humility in their words. Wallah, there are certain families you'll come across, they curse one another. They use profane language in the household. They use profanity and vulgar language in the household. Wallah, your children, they learn from this. They observe this. They absorb it like sponges. There was an interesting question that was asked on social media. Very deep question. The question was, when did you realize in your life that your family were rubbish? That your family were different from all the other families? One person replied, a woman, she replied. She said, the day I realized that my family were rubbish was the day when I visited my boyfriend's family. I was invited for dinner, I sat down, and when I saw them talking with one another, I realized how rubbish my family were. Children, when they grow up in such an environment, they believe that it's natural to speak in such a way. Only when they go to universities, when they go to the workplaces, they realize that what they were taught from such a young age was all wrong. And then they have to reprogram themselves and try and learn the appropriate adab of what is considered to be the norm in the community. And at the same time, they develop resentment towards their parents. And then there is a fasila, there is a separation between them and the parents. Number 3, teach them, for example, akhlaq, humility. Teach them how to be humble in front of the people. Teach them sadaqah. Tonight, being a Thursday night, is the night of sadaqah. Allow your children to give money. Allow your children to donate. Yes, I've seen certain parents do this. This is, wallah, beautiful. When you teach your children how to give, that when they grow up with this practice, they constantly know how to give. They don't ask 100 questions before giving. They give without asking questions. Number 4, friends. Make sure you know who your friends are, who your sons and your daughters' friends are. Not necessarily those who are outside of the house, but those who are online as well. There are certain fathers, there are certain mothers, they don't know what social media their children are on. They don't know what's going on the virtual world. They may be talking to strangers, and wallah, it's very easy to talk to strangers on social media. You have no idea what's going on in the lives of your sons and your daughters. Be on top of your observations. Know what is going on in the virtual world, in the world, or in the friends, or in the circle of your sons and your daughters' friends. Number 6, and most importantly, teach your sons and your daughters how to think. There's a difference between teaching them knowledge and teaching them how to think. We live in a day and age where we just show and we throw information at our sons and our daughters. We want them to learn and we want them to memorize. When we compromise teaching them the ability to think, we compromise teaching them the ability to make the right decisions in life, to be able to distinguish between truth and falsehood. Information does not carry much weight if the person does not know what to do with that information. You look, for example, on how we behave on the internet. We have multiple tabs open, each tab giving us plethora of information. We're never satisfied with the amount of information that's there in front of us. We constantly want more and more. There's only so much that the human mind can take. But if you teach your children how to think, that has a profound effect on them in their lives. And you find that this is exactly what the Ahl al-Bayt focused on. This is exactly what Muslim ibn Aqil focused on with his children. They say that when his 2 sons, Muhammad and Ibrahim, were captured, before they were captured, Muhammad and Ibrahim, they were in the house of Harith al-Hamadani. When they were in the house of Harith al-Hamadani, very interestingly, it was the wife of Harith al-Hamadani who protected them. It was in the middle of the night, Harith comes home, exhausted and tired. He says to his wife, he says, "Oh my wife, wallah, I cannot find the 2 sons of Muslim ibn Aqil." He says it is as if the earth has swallowed them, or the sama, or the skies have taken them. They have disappeared from the face of this earth altogether. I cannot find them. His wife replies to him, Ya Harith, what is it that you want from these two children of Muslim? Their father has been slaughtered, and they are now considered to be from amongst the Aitam of Kufa. Leave them be as they are. He replies, he says, Wallah, no. The rewards that I will get from Ibn Ziyad, the taqarrub, the proximity that I will have with Ibn Ziyad is worth it. It's profound. They say in the middle of the night, the two sons of Muslim Ibn Aqil, they were asleep. When one of them wakes up crying and lamenting and weeping, and the other brother wakes up, the older brother says to the younger brother, he says, oh my brother, what did you see? He says, oh my brother, I saw in my dream, I saw our father in my dream. I saw our father, Muslim Ibn Aqil. He turns to me, he says to me, oh my son, ya bunayya, al-ajal, ya bunayya, come to me. Come to me quickly. He says, my brother, when I heard these words, I am scared. I feel that we are in the final moments of our lives. The older brother turns to the younger one. He says, oh my brother, don't be afraid. It's okay. Everything will be all right. There is a hadith that takes place between them. And Harith al-Hamadani hears these words. When he hears the words of these two children, he calls out, Man fi bayti. He says, who is in my house? When they hear the words of Harith, the brothers, they call out, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Why? They say, we were under the protection of a woman, now we are under the protection of the Lord of the house, the Rabb al-Bayt, the owner of the house. We are under the protection of a man, he will protect us from Ibn Ziyad. They say to him, Ya Harith, we are the sons of Muslim Ibn Aqil. Harith comes forward and he says, Wallah, I've been searching for you in the streets of Kufa, not knowing that you are in my home, not knowing that you are resting in my own home. He brings forth rope and he ties the two sons and he drags them towards the slaughter. They say Harith had a black slave. He says to his slave, he says, take them, slaughter them, sever their heads, and bring me their heads. The black slave, he takes them towards the place. When one of the brothers turns to the slave and he says to him, oh man, oh slave, you remind me of Bilal al-Habash. The slave responds, he says, what do you know of Bilal? You are 10 years of age. What do you know of Bilal? Upon which the child responds, the son responds, he says, how can we not know Bilal? He was the companion of Rasulullah. We are from the Bayt, we are from the Ahl al-Bayt of Rasulullah. They say, the hadith remind us, they say to us that when the slave heard these words, it cracked open his heart. He cracked open his heart, he drops the sword and he runs away. Harith, when he sees his slave, he says, Wallah, you've disobeyed me. He says, I disobey you, but I will never disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The narrations explain Harith then proceeds towards the sons of Muslim Ibn Aqil. When he approaches the son, the sword in his hands, they say to him, Ya Harith, protect us, for indeed we are from the Ahl al-Bayt of Rasulullah. Have mercy on us. Harith replies, there is no mercy for you. Listen to this conversation. Their mental capacity was that of an adult. They say to him, Ya Harith, sell us in the slaves' markets. You'll earn some money and you'll save yourself from the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says to them, O sons of Muslim, it is not wealth that I want, it is the taqarrub, the proximity of Ibn Ziyad that I yearn and I long for. They say to him, O Harith, then take us to Ibn Ziyad, do not kill us, take us alive, and Allah will spare you in the hereafter. He says to them, Wallah, I will take your heads towards Ibn Ziyad. They say to him, Ya Harith, if that is the case, then allow us to recite 2 rak'ah salah. That's all we ask for. Harith gives them permission. They recite 2 rak'ah salah, they engage in dua. They finish from their salah and their dua. Harith approaches them and he unsheathes his sword. And he says to them, he says, who shall I strike first? They say the older brother steps forward and he says, Ya Harith, strike me first. For indeed my younger brother, he does not understand the heat of the blade. He does not understand the harara of the blade. The younger brother steps forward and he says, Ya Harith, La la la, strike me first, for indeed I cannot bear to see my older brother slaughtered in front of me. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. Let us stand and perform the azaa of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam.
लाल रुक़ैया के मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे कोई जरा ये जाकर कोई जरा ये जाकर अब्बास को बता दे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे जाने दे हमको जालिम हार से बोले बच्चे फिरते थे मारे मारे 2 दिन से भूखे प्यासे सर काटने से पहले पानी हमें पिला दे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे लगते थे जब तमाचे माँ को पुकारते थे हंसता था जब सितमगर कहते थे रो के बच्चे जालिम हमारी कोई तकसीर तो बता दे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शहज़ादे दिल पर असर है इतना अब्बास की वफा का ख्वाहिश बड़े की है वो कुर्बान पहले होगा छोटा ये चाहता है वो पहले सर कटा दे कूफे में गिर गए हैं
मुस्लिम के शाहजादे कूफे में घिर गए हैं। मुस्लिम के शाहजादे जिसको अमीर मुस्लिम शह ने लक़ब दिया था, औलाद पर उसी के आया है वक्त कैसा। जो चाहे घुड़किया दे, जो चाहे घुड़किया दे, जो चाहे वो सजा दे। कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे, कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे। मुस्लिम की थी वसीयत दो मेरे लाडले हैं, आफत पड़ी है ऐसी मुझसे बिछड़ गए हैं। मर जाऊं जब मैं कोई, मर जाऊं जब मैं कोई, माँ से उन्हें मिला दे। कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे, कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे। ढूंढो यही कहीं है उनसे भी बदला लूंगा, हाकिम ये कह रहा है इनाम उसको दूंगा। गाजी के भांजों को, गाजी के भांजों को जो कैद करके ला दे। कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे, कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे। कूफे के दर पे जिस दम मुस्लिम की लाश देखी, अकबर कहा ये माने रो रो के मेरे वाली। बतला दे बस कहाँ है, बतला दे बस कहाँ है आका कनीज़ ज़ादे। कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे, कूफे में घिर गए हैं मुस्लिम के शाहजादे।
وارث آدم صفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. واشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، واشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. واشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة حضرت علي أكبر عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. زيارة كل شهر الشهداء. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصح، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم، وطابت الأرض التي أنتم فيها دفنتم، وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة حضرت أبا الفضل العباس عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأهوطهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك، فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، والحقق الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. اللهم إني تعرضت لزيارة أوليائك رغبة في ثوابك ورجاء لمغفرتك وجزيل إحسانك، فأسألك أن تصلي على محمد وآله الطاهرين، وأن تجعل رزقي بهم دارا وعيشي بهم قارا وزيارتي بهم مقبولة وحياتي بهم طيبة، وأدرجني إدراج المكرمين، واجعلني ممن ينقلب من زيارة مشاهد أحبائك مفلحا منجحا قد استوجب غفران الذنوب وستر العيوب وكشف الكروب، إنك أهل التقوى وأهل المغفرة. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا قامع الكفر والطغيان، يا دافع الظلم والعدوان، يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك، وجعلنا من أنصارك ومحبيك وشيعتك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا، دليلا وعينا أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون